Welcome to the podcast, Shane Gussman.
Hello.
So happy to have you.
Good to be here.
Where are you today?
I'm in my office in Sacramento, just kind of finishing some last minute stuff. The legislature's out of session now, and we're kind of wrapping up some things as the governor's kind of, going over all the bills, deciding what to do with them.
It's a big time for you then. So
Yeah.
everyone's waiting, nervous to see. Is that what's happening right now?
Yeah, this is the part where, as a lobbyist, it's kind of all really out of your hands, but this is really out of your hands. It's, the governor has possession of all the bills, and, he and his staff are going to decide what to do with them. And, as a lobbyist working on legislation, it is a kind of a scary time because you don't know what's going on behind the closed doors. It's you keep your fingers crossed for 30 days.
Right. It's like when an actor is up for an Oscar, like you did your work, you did everything you could, and now you just have to wait to see if they're going to call your name
Right.
on that evening, right?
Right. And a lot of times you don't even know why they did or didn't. So it's a tough time. That's why I have the gray hair that I have.
Most of us do and cover it. Okay, so I want to talk about how we met because it's very magical that we would ever meet. I say magical because I was out following my passion, which is to do work for SAG-AFTRA. I'm a volunteer on 2 committees, and one of them is our Government Public and Policy Committee, also called GAP. And I was shocked when they invited me to come to Sacramento. I'm fairly new on the committee, although I do work as a political consultant. But this was just such a win-win for me to be able to go. And I had no idea I was going to meet you. I had seen you, Shane, on some Zoom meetings, and I was very impressed with this lobbyist from Sacramento. I've never met a lobbyist, which is why I wanted you on my podcast. And I think a lot of people really misunderstand or don't know what a lobbyist does. So I hope to clear that up today in about 1 minute. So anyhow, I feel this great need to do a shout out and to continue the story for other actors who are in the union or want to be in the union. There's so many ways to serve. And this committee, which is close to my heart, they invited me to come to Sacramento, and I want to shout out to Carrie Wood Einerston, who is staff at SAG-AFTRA, and she was our fearless leader taking us to Sacramento. Also, Sean Astin, who testified, and I'm assuming you arranged that. We'll get into that in Sacramento on AI, a huge issue for actors and non-actors. On our committee who went to Sacramento, myself, Rachel Balick, Eric Pasoja, Rick Foster, Liza Monet, Laquan Bennett, Heather Ashley. And so I might be missing 1 or 2 people, and I deeply apologize. It was a solid group. So we knew that we were coming to Sacramento, and Shane was going to show us around the Hill, and Sean was going to testify. How did you make all that happen for us?
Well, part of being a lobbyist is you're kind of the point of contact for government officials and the sort of the go-between between them and your clients that you represent. And in this instance, there is a ton of buzz around AI, and everybody wants to be involved in terms of policymakers. And there are a number of interested legislators. The Labor Committee has been interested in this. The Assembly Labor Committee, who held the hearing, has been interested in this for a while. They held their first hearing on it a few years back, and they kind of wanted to update folks, and they really wanted a perspective on AI and its effect in the workplace. And so they reached out to me because they know I represent not only SAG-AFTRA, who has been really out front on this issue, but a number of other unions that AI will affect and has affected. And so they reached out to me to see if I could find some folks who would be interested in testifying. And immediately SAG-AFTRA came to mind, and we kind of put it together with your government relations team, and they got talked Sean into doing it. I don't know if it took much talking into it, but
He's a natural. He's a
yeah,
natural,
he
right?
is a natural. And of course, once the ball got rolling on that, the committee, the legislators, the staff were very excited to have him there and have SAG-AFTRA's participation. So it was, some of these things you kind of have, as a lobbyist, have to push, but this one was an easy one because of who was it.
Yes. Yeah, and we could see that everyone was a little starstruck with Sean,
Right.
rightfully. And that was fun, having these legislators come over and want their picture taken at dinner and wherever we went. I got my head and heart around the issue for the first time in that hearing, because not only did Sean speak and talk about the plight of actors, but we also heard a hotel worker, a professor, someone from the medical field. I have to ask, has there been follow-up since that hearing?
Well, there were, I think, probably over 100 bills introduced kind of at the same time as they were scheduling these hearings. So I think, it certainly created some momentum behind some of that legislation. Some of it has been reported in the press. There was a bill that SAG-AFTRA is supporting, dealing with requiring companies that create AI to look into the potential dangers to the public. It's a big bill that, the Googles of the world were opposing, and it was unclear whether it was going to get out of the legislature. Because of that testimony, folks who were pushing that bill reached out to us and got us involved, and we are certainly helping them in that endeavor. And it's sitting on the governor's desk, and we're hopeful he'll sign it. We have our own bills that we've been pursuing on AI, and particularly around digital replicas and people, actors, performers being able to protect their voice and likeness from being, taken without their consent and replicated and done who knows what with, whether it's creating performances or, more nefarious things like deepfakes, really terrible things that are happening out there now. So
Horrible, and also can happen to politicians, people that were
happen to politicians, happen to anybody, happen to kids in school. We are co-sponsors of a bill dealing with deep fakes for minors and making sure that they are protected. We had a SAG-AFTRA member up here testifying in support of that bill, and there were a number of other bills that I think that hearing and Sean's testimony, gave a little added oomph to. But there's no question that there's going to be more next year and the years to come, because this issue is not going away.
Do you feel that actors have a better chance at persuading lawmakers, especially when you bring in celebrities?
Yeah, I find that it's incredibly persuasive in that everybody's in love with celebrities, and politicians are not any different. And the politicians and staff will tend to listen and give more credibility to actors, particularly celebrities. The other component of it is, when you're advocating for something, particularly in a public forum, there is a level of performance to it. And certainly actors have an advantage in that regard. So it's kind of a two powerful things coming together. And it's always great to see, like, when actors like Sean come out and, can talk to a senator or speak at a committee. It's always very persuasive.
It is. And of course, that's why I'm using the acting technique I teach to work with politicians and public speakers. So we're all on the same playing field of authenticity and expression. What would you advise to the everyday tradesman actor who's not a celebrity yet? How can they help and get involved and help AI from getting completely out of control?
Well, I mean, I think developing relationships with policymakers that are going to have a say on this is incredibly important. Um, when we have any issue for any union I represent, having real people, I always say real people versus the lobbyists. They're who they see me every day. Of course, we have great relationships and, they listen to me, but it's always more powerful for a constituent to be able to communicate. You mentioned authenticity. That's incredibly important. And when you're a real person, a real constituent, and you're communicating with a policymaker, that's what that brings, that authenticity, that it makes it real for them because they truly care what their constituents think. And that comes from a lot of different things. The most basic is they got to run for reelection, and they assign a certain amount of, every time they talk to a constituent, they think like, oh, there's like 5,000 other people in my district that think that way. But yeah, I think developing those relationships, particularly at the local level, whether it's city council or a state legislator, they all have their local offices. Going in and, having a coffee with them, making an appointment, showing up at one of their events. Those things are all important so that the next time they see you, when they're with me coming up to the Capitol and I say, hey, they remember meeting you. And immediately there's that connection. And that connection is really what kind of can trigger that sort of, I'm going to give you some credibility when you're talking to me.
I feel that my legislators, especially my congressman is Congressman Ted Lieu, who's also been on this podcast, and have open door policies. And I think sometimes we look at politicians like they're really inaccessible and they're not real people. And it's hard after what I witnessed in Sacramento to say, like, that's really hard to believe because what I saw felt like very neighborly and folks getting up there from all walks of life and sharing their testimonies. Can anyone go to these hearings in Sacramento?
Absolutely. They're public hearings. You can look them up on the internet. Both the Assembly and the Senate have their own websites, and they post their schedules, and you can see when the hearings are going to be, what room they're going to be in, et cetera. And they're completely open to the public. Not only that, if you can't make it here, not everybody can make it here, you can always, all of them are either televised or at least you can listen to them on their website. And so they're very accessible, these hearings. I think you can even go back in archives and listen to ones that I've
Oh, wow.
passed. So, but yeah, they welcome the public. Of course, not every individual, as we've seen in the news, in the public, is respectful. So it's obviously very important to understand that these are public hearings and everybody gets their own fair opportunity to engage and to not step on anybody else's ability to engage, which sometimes unfortunately happens, but for the most part people are respectful. And yes, legislators really do want to hear from the public.
Okay, great. So AI is the number one hot topic issue. It's already out of control. Do you foresee this being, front of the line with the work you're going to do with SAG-AFTRA for the next 10, 20 years?
Oh God, I hope not. Definitely in the short term, for it's both sort of inside SAG-AFTRA is dealing with the studios and the employers, and on the sort of the out and dealing with public policymakers. Yeah, I don't see the issue going away anytime soon. I think there's a lot of stuff to build on. We had two bills this year, AB 1836, that dealt with rights of publicity for deceased performers and kind of tackling that in the context of AI. And then we had another bill that deals with consent, AB 2602, consent over your voice or likeness and that interplay with AI. both of those kind of build on what happened in collective bargaining, during the strike and after the strike. And, all of that work, even if both of those bills are signed, all of that work has to continue. There's a lot to build on there, and the technology develops faster than we can,
Yes.
address it. And so we're always going to have to be kind of at front and center, as it, relates to protecting performers' rights. And yes, whether it's AI or some different version of that technology in the future, yeah, we're gonna be out there sort of protecting the rights of the members, of course.
Do you feel that we're like it's too late, kind of like climate change? It's a bit too late and hard to catch up.
I think no. It to me it feels like um there's a bipartisan willingness to engage on this issue, unlike climate change. It feels like in the area of
Mhm,
climate change, we got into this place where we don't believe science anymore or whatever, and it
mhm.
became a partisan issue.
Yes.
This is really not a partisan issue because AI affects everybody and it can have an impact, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or whatever, it
Mhm.
affects some interest you're interested in. And so, for instance, our two bills, bringing it back to our legislation this year, it was very easy. We got a lot of support from everyone, all political walks of life. Even those that didn't vote for the bill, they were very sympathetic to the issue. And I think even though the technology has started to develop, years ago, it's still not out there in the way where we can't do anything about it.
Okay, I'm very happy to hear that, and I love your optimism, and I will join you in that. When I was in Sacramento, I know we were walking in that 90-degree heat, from building to building, and I mentioned to you, and I also mentioned to Sean, that for me as a communicator, that's what I do for a living, that I think there should be a sit down with tech and with actors, and I suggested that Sean be the face of this. But a public hearing, a public conversations, like take this, it feels like it's in the closet, like technology. We don't know what's in the black box. We heard that a lot at the hearing. Who knows what's in the black box? Who's watching, overseeing the black box of AI? To have public conversations, do you think this would help technology to be more accountable?
I think it might. The one takeaway that I've had dealing with these companies over the years is it seems to require to have those conversations. It seems to require a reason for those companies to come to the table. They tend to, and it's part of their whole, mantra or their philosophy about, you know, we're trying to develop faster than government or people outside of tech can understand. Um, don't put any, restrictions on us because you're going to harm innovation. Um, Trust us. We've got your best interest at heart. It's really kind of that
Ah,
that mindset that's hard when you're trying to have a dialogue as equals. And you know, unfortunately, it seems to take, bills introduced in legislators or in Congress or whatever to get them to the table to have these discussions. I think ideally, yes, that would be great if we could have a forum and sit down, the union and other unions that deal with AI in the entertainment space, and we could sit down with, Google and Meta or whoever, and
mhm.
kind of, talk this through and see if there could be some kind of common understanding. Um, it's hard for me in my experience with them to see that happening unless there's some uh,
Incentive.
incentive for them. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like arrogance on their part. And we're basically talking about human beings remaining human. That's the bigger issue. And as actors who represent humanity, it's frightening. That's my job, is to help people become more human, because we're already, when I meet an actor, they already come so conditioned by society. And a lot of the process is to really find who you are without all that messaging. And when I think about AI, how unhuman it is, it's weird. Like, we used to search all the time. You search in Facebook, you search for something on Instagram, but now it's saying, do you want AI to help you? And it's so creepy. Like, we were already doing it. Who did we already think we were talking to? There's a little bit of denial, I think, on everyone's part, because again, it's convenient.
Right.
It's convenient to look something up to get instant information, but at what price?
Yeah. What's the cost? Yeah.
What is the human cost? So for me, as an actress, as an acting teacher, that's really what concerns me. And I just took some notes. I love, meeting with Google, Meta, talking it through. I think the only way to attack AI is the human way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the only way, is to have the face of AI up on a stage, up on a panel from these companies, and not hide behind their technology. So whatever I can do to make this happen, I'm on board. Like, I sign up for this to happen, and it's going to take something so uniquely human to move us forward, and so gutsy. And it is man versus the machine is where we're headed.
It is.
Really scary times.
It is. I think right now, um, if you put the two side by side, the humanness comes out in a regular performer, a writer, or any kind of artist. You can see it right away when it's set side by side with AI. And I think that's where performers and artists win, because the reality is the technology is at its infancy with respect to being anywhere near comparable to what, a real artist can create. And of course, you're right. The fear is that the technology gets there in sometime soon where it's really impossible to tell. And yeah, I think, like you said, it's scary, but we're gonna have to face it head on, and we can't
Yes.
have our head in the sand. And part of it is all the things that you're talking about in terms of, actors getting more involved in politics and bringing this issue to the forefront as, a existential threat, right? And that's what it is, and people need to understand that.
And I think that actors are naturally people that have strong points of view, are empathetic, care, but it is about making this a priority. Why do some people join committees at SAG? Why some don't? They're busy pursuing their career. I think it has to be a holistic approach as an actor to the world. And if you're going to represent the world, then you need to be a part of the world. It's very, very important. I'm curious, what made you want to be a lobbyist?
I kind of fell into it by accident. I always have been interested in politics. Even when I was a little kid, I was interested in politics. I remember back, I don't even know what grade I was in elementary school, getting in a fist fight with someone who's their parents were voting for another presidential candidate than I was supporting.
Wow.
And it was with my best friend. So everything was fine after that. But so yeah, I've been interested in politics for, forever. I didn't think I was ever going to work in politics. I've really been interested in advocating for people. Whether it was my coworkers in a workplace I worked in, in college, or, in law school, I worked for a union. I worked for legal services advocating for people who were getting kicked out of their housing. I just kind of was always interested in kind of being the voice for someone, for something they needed or they cared about or they were afraid of or whatever. And after law school, I went out and I was worked at a litigation firm, and it just wasn't very fulfilling. And then this opportunity to become a union side lobbyist came around, and just by chance, a friend of a friend, and the rest is history. That was 25 years ago. And I haven't had a complaint since. I love this job. Um, I can't say all lobbyists or lobbying jobs are created equal. It's a unique thing. I get to match my work with my politics and my beliefs and everything else.
Hmm.
I'm sure that's not always the same for every lobbyist out there. But for me, it's been great.
That's wonderful. So you are our representative. So you're going to go in first and present. So there's some, I don't want to say acting skills, but there's some communication skills involved in your job
Yeah,
because you have to state our case, our opinion, what we need and want before we even come to the table. Is that correct?
that's right. And it's face to face. It's also the written word, which is incredibly important. That's kind of maybe the first thing. And to be an effective lobbyist, you really have to, the best, know how to write really well. And because you also tend to participate in writing the legislation, but also writing all the materials that go in to support a bill before the bill is even a bill. All those advocacy pieces, and a lot of times lobbyists will write talking points for the legislators or their staff. And then there's going out and advocating for the bill with other legislators, not the author of the bill. And yeah, that you have to be able to communicate. It's the very basic part of the job. If you can't communicate your point, effectively and concisely is really important, because you've got a minute or two to convince someone to care about what you're saying, or at least put the
Wow.
hook in to have them ask some questions. So yeah, we're the face of it. Lobbyists are the face. A lot of them do it differently. Sometimes, if you have a client that doesn't have folks that want to participate, unlike SAG-AFTRA, then you kind of have to do it all yourself. Otherwise, you use the tools that you have, right? And so one of the great tools that SAG-AFTRA have are all of you, all the actors, and we get the chance to bring folks up to testify or meet with legislators, and that's part of the communication too, and that's extremely effective.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being the first face, the first word. We all thank you at our union, really, for the service that you do. I had no idea how deeply involved you went, like in terms of legislation. That's really interesting. Do you find that some people think of lobbyists as a dirty word? I mean,
Oh, for sure.
because I'm looking at you and I'm inspired by you, and I feel that your job has so much I want to say power, but it has some it helps us to move forward, and it makes stuff happen. I mean, you're a doer. You really have a voice on what's happening in our government.
Yeah, I do think, yeah, and I appreciate that. I think that lobbyists, maybe rightly so, have a certain reputation somewhere above or below used car salesmen. And, I think it's an image the public has that is probably unfair.
Yes.
I think that the interesting thing that I found when I first started working as a lobbyist is how honest people are in this profession, just generally speaking. I can't speak for every state or whatever, but in California politics, it truly is your word is your bond, and there's a real collegial environment. Even lobbyists that I have to fight with all the time, we're friendly, otherwise. And when someone says they're gonna go neutral on a bill or vote for a bill or do something with respect to legislation we're working on. Unlike in my previous life in litigation, I don't need to ask them for a confirmation letter that I have to hold them to their promise. They make the promise, they're going to keep it. Generally speaking, I've had maybe in the 25 years, a handful of people go back on something they've committed to. And so it is really I think very much different than the public's perception of what lobbyists are in kind of the world of legislative politics.
I'm so happy to hear that. And does that also mean that people are working across the aisle with each other?
More than it would seem by whatever news outlet you're listening to. I think if you looked at the 1,500 bills that were worked on this year that made it most of the way through, and most of them going to the governor's desk, most of those bills were bipartisan. You always hear about the ones that are controversial. And so, of course, everybody thinks that that's the way it is on everything, but it's not.
It's so sad. I'm going to start a good news channel. You can tell me all the bills that everyone collaborated on.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's very hard with our media. I don't know what to watch, so I try to get my news sources from a lot of different places and make up my own mind. I think the best thing for actors is to get involved because that's the only way you'll really know what's happening. And when I listened to all those people at the hearing, I finally understood how it's not just actors that this is affecting AI. It's the world.
Everyone.
And yeah, it's how our world's going to exist for the remaining years that it's here. So I thank you for your work that you're doing. And I hope that we're back in Sacramento soon. I hope that you call upon us and that we can contribute. It's been so interesting talking to you. Do you have a website or social media or any way that people can read more about you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, anybody could send me. I have a website, but it's probably, we're a very small firm.
Okay.
We're not one of these big giant operations. We run very lean. But if folks want to email me, I'm happy to give my email address out. It's Gusman, Gusman @bglaw.org. And I'm always happy to answer questions, particularly from, members, actors who are listening to this. I share what you said. It's great that you all came up here and that you're involved. And I guess be careful what you wish for. We'll be calling on you to testify on more bills in the future and work on more things.
I'm prepared to fight the good fight. Thank you so much, Shane. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
You're welcome. Pleasure is all mine.
Thank you, Shane Gussman. What a conversation. There's so much to learn about AI, and we thank you for representing our union, SAG-AFTRA, in Sacramento. If you'd like to hear more of my podcasts, please visit my website at diaryofanactress.com. Until the next time, stay inspired.